Welcome to MRE Uncut, where we'll give you real and practical insights into the real estate scene in Melbourne. We'll discuss what's happening in the industry, all backed by MRE's history of over 30 years in the game. With that said, let's jump into this week's episode of MRE Uncut.
Welcome back to another MRE podcast. My name's Stephen Fitzsimon. I've got Peter Hooymans with me. And then I've got a guest today. We have Matthew Hale from Rising Tide. Matty, welcome.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good.
Pleasure. Good to see you, mate.
What's Rising Tide for our listeners?
Rising Tide, pretty holistic financial planning business, mortgage broking, financial planning, investing, life insurance, some of the fun stuff. Pretty much for young families, people that are looking to have young families, and people that want to look and think a little bit more into their future and get it all together.
Good, nice.
You've been going for a while.
We've been going since 2005. Legislation has caused a few changes along the journey. I'd say we're probably into Mark 3 of the business.
Right.
It's not easy, compliance in your space.
Compliance, cost of living,
Yeah.
you know, like we were talking about before,
Mhm.
the average household's expense has gone up, and the cost to serve from a business point of view has. And I'm not necessarily certain that the average punter's getting the advice that we wished they could, because that cost to serve precludes a lot of people.
I had a mate I was talking to on Sunday. I won't say his name. Talking about advice, and he said to me, "Oh, what do you know about income protection?" I said, "Not much." I said, "What are you paying?" He said, "I'm paying $22,000 a year." I said, "Mate, why?" I said, "You're a real estate agent. You're not on a building site. You're not going to have a brick fall on your head." And I said, "You should pay." Again, I wasn't given financial advice, but it struck me that he said, "Oh, well, it's gone up as I've got older." I said, "Well, how long have you had it?" "Oh, since I was 30. He's like 50. So 25 years he's been paying this income protection. I was kind of thinking in my head, he's probably paid 250 grand in premium.
The devil is absolutely in the detail. And unfortunately with insurance, it is something that I think most people want to have and probably need to have, but it's questioned at times, particularly more in the last 2 to 3 years. Fortunately, most of our clients, we think about their foundations and their contingency and their plan B pretty holistically. So that's everything from a cash buffer, which has become a lot more pertinent in the last 6 to 12 months, but it's the insurance, it's the wills, it's all the stuff that probably gives you the peace of mind to be able to go out and invest and maybe take a bit more risk elsewhere in your financial life.
Which is sort of what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, we're talking about part of this conversation came up because in the office we're talking about the staff mix that we've got, and they're fairly young crew, and what they're planning on doing. And we've been doing some training around the business of property and this type of thing, trying to give them a holistic understanding of why people invest in property and what the outcomes are trying to drive by, rather than just opening doors for people to have a look at rentals. And one of the things that's come up time and time again is that they're not really prepared to start their journey in owning properties. And I thought, well, Matty's going to be a good guy to be able to give them some sort of guidance around how they can get on the property ladder sooner, and ways that they can sort of set themselves up for success faster. And so henceforth today we're thinking two things. One was sort of like rent vesting, and what is that? How does it work? And if you can sort of go into a little bit for that for us, Matty. And then secondly, we're looking at if you are struggling to save up for a deposit, what sort of tips and guidance could you give those guys that are out there that are in that difficult space at the moment to get them closer to being ready to buy?
That second one's a juicy one.
Good.
Should we kick off with rent vesting?
Yeah, wherever you prefer.
Look, really simply, we see rent vesting as when people choose to invest in property, not necessarily in places that they want to live. So they purchase a house, an apartment, whatever it might be, they rent it out to someone, and then they choose to more likely rent where they want to live. So, a good example might be that someone grew up out in the suburbs, wants to get into the property market, buys a house but doesn't actually want to live there. Then they go and rent in Richmond or in South Yarra, wherever it might be. They're getting access to the property market and hopefully some capital appreciation. It gives them something to pay off. It gives them something to commit to, but they don't have to sacrifice on their lifestyle and live where they can afford to buy.
Right. So they want to buy a 2-bedroom house. They can't afford to buy a 2-bedroom house in South Yarra. So they buy a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house in, where? Pakenham?
Blackburn.
I don't know.
I don't know. That's probably a bit expensive.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Ringwood East.
Don't know. Still
I
$1 million
grew up
it?
in the Yarra Valley and bought my first house in Mount Evelyn.
Yeah.
And then a year later lived in Richmond. You've been watching, I can't believe you said that.
Yeah.
And started renting in Richmond. So I was renting in Richmond when I was 20.
And you owned the house.
And I was
in
zipping
Mount-
out to this house doing renovations at night. And then I bought my second house in Churnside Park when I was 21 or 2.
So it's
and I rented
similar.
them out.
Yeah.
And they washed the rates were 10%, but the rent was such that they kind of paid for themselves. And then 1 minute they were 60 grand and the next minute they were 200.
And that is one of the things to take into consideration. And Steve, to go back to your point around why we're having this conversation, you mentioned it's all about the why. Why do people invest in property? And I think that's the best place to start. Some people invest in property because they want to have the safety of having a roof over their head that they control. Other people want to do it to make money. Other people want to say they've got a property. There's a whole raft of things that drive that decision. But for people to have a really good understanding of what the machinations and the implications of it, you've got tax, you've got interest rates. And that's probably one of the things that we've seen over the last 12 to 24 months where interest rates have gone from 2% to 6 or 7%, that a lot of people are realizing they had taken on
Too much
risk that they weren't necessarily prepared for.
Yeah, right. So, because I think there's a bit more pain to come. What do you think?
Oh, look, certainly don't have a crystal ball. And I always reflect back on the fact that, the bloke at the time who was running the Reserve Bank didn't know that rates were going to go up. So if he didn't know 15 months in advance, how are we going to? I would say that there's not necessarily more pain to come, but to endure the consistent and current pain.
That's kind of what I meant, was that the full pain of the existing rates is sort of hasn't flowed through yet in full.
Yeah, look, the way that we would sort of back of the envelope type stuff, we would always say, look at the fixed rates for 3, 4, 5 years.
What are they now?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can check it up.
Yeah.
But they're not dramatically cheaper or
6%,
more expensive.
something like that. Yeah.
And the reason for that is that the banks are forecasting, and the banks have a pretty good idea. And believe it or not, the banks are pretty good at making a buck.
Yeah.
So we would always say it's not going to be dramatically outside of that. But also what's happening, there was a lot of really low rates in 2021, 2022.
2%.
And most of those fixed rates are now starting to roll out. So I think inevitably each household has probably got a bit more pain to go through.
I reckon I've got a mate who got one. He had multiple investment properties and he locked in at 1.7, 1.69, something like that for 3. I think it was 2 or 3 years. That was the only time I've ever known a client to do a fixed rate and win. Because my theory is the banks only offer you a fixed rate because they're going to win. They don't, you know what I mean?
Oh, I think they definitely.
But I think he got them on this one.
There's definitely been a few people in that position.
Yeah.
But now the irony is, if most of us are spending more at the petrol bowser, at the supermarket checkout, and we've got a 30-year loan, it needs to be a really good decision and have a really clear plan on, if you are looking to rent somewhere but buy and build your portfolio, be really wary that it's a long-term decision. I think we see more people make decisions around property where they have to undo them in 3 or 5 years.
We talked about this last week, actually. We talked about, when I was coming through the ranks, property was always a 10, 20, 30-year thing. All of a sudden now we've got landlords who want to sell. They've only been in the market 3 or 4 years. The chat was really about taking a bit longer view. Stick it out.
But I don't think they've been able to stick it out. Like, I think some of the clients are sitting there going, we thought that the property would be going up. We thought that
stick it out if you
costs
can.
wouldn't be. Yeah, stick it out if you can.
Yeah.
Hang tough.
Because they're out of suburb. We were saying most of them are 11%, 10 to 11 compound capital over the last 30 years. I looked at, it was an ABS stats, so they're real stats. Yeah, and that's pretty good growth.
Yeah, if you can hang tough. If you can hang tough, and that's where we would say have a really robust conversation, be clear on what you're trying to achieve, and be wary of what some of those trade-offs might be. I love the fact that if more people can get into the property market and aligns with what they're trying to achieve, and they're aware that interest rates go up and down, you know, that there will be something on the radar like land tax that's changed pretty dramatically in the past 24 months. There'll be something else that pops up. You guys see it more than ever, the compliance that comes.
Yep.
Changes do occur in the cost of a house. And I think for people to think about their investment properties a bit like a business, you know, there's some growth in there, but you've also got to have cash flow to be able to make it tick over. And there's probably some other sacrifices you need to make along the journey if you want to be able to hang tough for 10 or 20 years. And that's where you'll really reap the benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we get the pain often of investors that have negatively geared their properties, but they're not on significant incomes. So they've got these negatively geared assets, and it's painful for them to find the money for the OC levy. It's painful for them to find the money for the gas and electrical checks. It's painful if their tenant vacates and they've got to pay for advertising and this type.
Maddie said back of the envelope, rough, and you do it in your head now, you have a couple on $100,000 a year each, which is $130,000 after tax. And then they borrow $800,000 on a property at 6.5%, or closer to 7%, $56,000.
Yeah.
So that only leaves 55 or 60 for living, and that's before they pay for a car and school. It's not even doable. And that's on what used to be, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, if you had a couple that were on 100 each, 6 figures each, you kind of, they're pretty, that's easy. That's an easy deal. But now it's not.
It's not at all. And look, for us, you know, being in financial planning, having a really clear plan, but also being aware of the risks and also being conservative are really important. But it doesn't mean that people can't do it. I think for us, what we would like to see throughout this whole cost of living surge is that people start to plan their lives out a bit more methodically. If there's kids on the agenda, then think about childcare, think about, you know, the options that you've got with further schooling, where you buy. But I also I've been overlay it with things like rent vesting to go, well, there may be a point in time where we need to make decisions to not necessarily rent the $1,000 a week house in Brunswick. You might need to move out a couple of suburbs to the $700 a week place if you want to continue living in that area, because that's $300 a week that you then get back to be able to do the important things for the family, be able to buy the blueberries at $13 a punnet and stuff like that, if that's what's important to you.
Important things for the family. Yeah.
Hey, blueberries in my
you know,
house.
the thing, well, $1,000 a
Gold.
week rent sounds like a lot. And 4 or 5 years ago, I couldn't even fathom that being close. But yet now a lot of stuff we're renting is $1,000 a week, $900, $800. Rents are really out of control.
I can give you, we live in Brunswick West, the Toorak of the North.
That's what I've heard that.
Yeah.
And
a lot of Range Rovers there, I've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a house next door to us, which is being renovated, but it's a weatherboard, 4-bedroom, and it's up for $900 a week.
Yeah.
And the backyard, the photos look a lot better on realestate.com than it does in real life.
Well, if you gave it to us, it'd probably be $1,100 a week.
Yeah, we could do a better job.
Yeah.
Just get me some good tenants next
Now,
door.
we had the juicy question. What was the juicy question for Maddie was?
Which one?
The second question. Saving for a deposit.
How can people get closer to property?
Yeah. Well, you know, all these young kids, because they talk to us, and we had a chat the other day. Pete was talking to a group of them, and they were like, you know, how much money do you have in your bank account? And it's all like $400, $28, you know, this type of thing.
But we did go through one budget of what an individual, and that was about $500 a week on $6 coffees. Every day,
and multiple.
But this was the other big one that struck me was lunch. So they buy lunch every day.
Lunch every day,
which was $22.
Yeah.
So it's $28 a day on lunch and a coffee. So that's $150 a week.
Yeah. Then you got to get your nails done.
That's before the other things.
And your hair. Like,
So
as I said, I did my hair in 6 minutes this morning in front of the.
I don't cut my own hair, but you know that's going to be far.
Oh well, I don't think it is if you like it short.
So what give us some ideas.
Really simply, the first port of call has to be to create goals that are really going to drive you. Whether you're on 80 grand a year or someone earning a couple $100 grand a year, the only way I believe that you can achieve your goals is by having goals that really drive you. You know, a lot of purpose. It's not saying, I want to buy a property, I want to do this. It's actually sitting down, create it, see it, a lot of purpose, vision behind it, and then it's all about creating the habits.
So do you do those plans for people? They come to you and they say, "This is what I'm going to do," and then you like knock up a budget and a plan. Is it?
Yeah, it's actually been the biggest change in our business in the last 5 or 6 years. We used to provide people with a lot of good strategic advice, and then after a period of time, we realized that it made sense on paper, but there was just something not quite connecting. People would check out, wouldn't happen, they would get despondent. So what we've now done is we've got a really clear structure of going, predominantly we're working with couples, and it's take this away, get your goals down on paper. We break it down into basic, comfortable, and dream, and then we break it down into sort of short, medium, and long term. What's really important to you? And then we help them distill it to the 3 or 4 things that they really want to do. And it's often first home buyer. Even the first home buyer has a different avatar than what they used to because of this exact conversation. It's taking longer. It might be late 20s, early 30s rather than late teens, early 20s like it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But once they get clarity, then it starts to come together. We can create some structure. We can automate their money a bit. We can help them understand their benchmarks. And all of a sudden, the $6 coffee might be the 7-Eleven coffee. The lunch might be bringing it every 1 or 2 days, but then they start to see it building. And Steve, to go back to your point, it might not necessarily be that property is the first thing. It might be just building up that buffer. Then it might be doing, a whole raft of options. It could be investing in some Australian shares and international shares till they get to the point where they can afford it. It's a bit more bite size. Might be using an ING savings maximizer, one of those accounts. Now that interest rates are a bit higher, you're getting a bit better bang for your buck. One of the strategies that we often see now, particularly compared to 10 years ago, is the bank of mum and dad. And that's not necessarily cash. It's often more guarantors. So the banks will look at it and go, hey, Matt and Annie, you can service a loan, but you've got not enough in there to do it. Could potentially one of your parents utilize some, figuratively hand you some of their equity.
Is that a co-borrow arrangement as well, or just a guarantee, or sometimes both? Because that's a distinction, yeah.
Yeah, more often than not, it's guarantor, and there's only very few banks that know it and do it well. Most.
Who are they?
ANZ do it well. They're probably the one that we're most comfortable with.
Okay.
But also,
because the co-borrow just gives you a bit more borrowing ability, yeah?
Yeah, and I mean, what we're generally finding, it's not necessarily the servicing. So when you go to buy your house, you've got the 2 boxes you've got to tick, and neither is more important than the other. You've got your servicing and then you've got your deposit. You have to tick both. There is other alternatives. You got your first home buyer scheme, which obviously deviates slightly from the rent vesting. You might need to live there for 12 months or 24 months. You can get reduced.
Go into that a little bit.
So effectively, if you haven't owned a property before, and there's a whole raft of different legislation and options depending on where you are in Australia, but really high level, if you've never owned a property before that you've lived in, and you can get stamp duty reductions, first home owners grants. There's a whole raft of different things, and they tend to change every year in May with the budget.
Right.
But go to moneysmart.gov.au. It's a really good place to start. Speak with a mortgage broker or a financial planner. But the first thing that I would recommend to everyone is get in touch. We can send you through our goal plan. I always say, whatever your poison of choice is, whether it's blueberries, a glass of red, coffee, or a block of chocolate, sit there over the weekend and really thrash it out. Because if you haven't got clear goals, it's going to be bloody hard.
So have you got some forms or something that is that on your website? Or?
Yeah. And then the overlay of that, once you got your
Where do we find that?
risingtidefinancial.com.au.
Beautiful.
Or alternatively, my details will be available. Find me on LinkedIn and I can send it across to you. But you've got goal planner. We've got a really strong budget form, and it's also linked towards what the banks use. So everyone thinks about their budget in terms of what they spend. But when it comes to getting a loan with the banks, some of it is dictated to what they believe you should spend. So if this makes sense,
right.
Annie and I...
Is it accurate?
I think it's fair.
Oh, sorry. I should say, is it realistic?
I would say that it's fair, but it also comes down to your circumstances. So at a really high level, it comes down to postcode, structure of your family. So for Annie and I, they would go, 2 adults, 2 kids under 4, and they own a property and they're in postcode 3055. So they depersonalize us, and they would give us a base level of what we should spend. But then they'll also look at our individuals and they go, hey, Matt, you might be spending a heap on travel, or you might, have a recurring subscription to Blueberries, whatever it might be. And they will then look at your individual circumstances, or they might be filling up the Prado over in Broome at $900 a pop, Pete.
Yeah, they could be doing that too. Actually, I've got a friend who's on substantial money, executive sort of role, substantial money, not quite 7 figures, but nearly, but got 5 kids. So borrowing ability, almost none. Can borrow like something, can't buy a house.
There is a lot of people across the whole spectrum of incomes, family situations,
Dependents.
that would no longer be able to borrow what they currently have.
Yeah, right.
Right. So it's tightened up that much. So now they're looking at
they put if
kids
you
are
can,
expensive.
Kids are expensive. Interest rates are a lot more expensive. And throughout the last 10 years, as property prices have doubled, if you were thinking that maybe back then it was 4 or 5% on an average loan of $400,000 or $500,000, maybe that average loan is $600,000, $800,000 plus interest is at 6%. You're probably forking out double what you were. And I don't think there's a lot of people that are earning double what they were 10 years ago.
Because I got a bit of a theory, like you really can't, doesn't matter whether you're buying a house in Hillsville for 600 or 700, whatever it is, further in, or Box Hill or Hawthorne, let's say you want to buy in Hawthorne at $8 million and it's going up at 10% per annum. Well, unless you're in some extraordinary corporate role, you cannot save money as fast as the market's moving. But it's been like that for 30 years. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to kind of somehow get in.
Yeah.
So how do you somehow get in?
How
do you do that?
I think people have to look a bit further and wider than what they used to.
Would you go regional?
I think once again, it really depends on what's...
Wangaratta for 400. Wangaratta's gone up too now.
I think to your point, everything's going up, and it really depends on what the trajectory of your earnings is going to be, and what you prioritize. I think it's fundamentally a different situation and discussion now, that if the major chapters in people's lives over the past 50 years have been career building, married, kids, house in some form or another, often it was nearly the career building that happened after. You'd get married, people would get married, have kids, they'd already have a house, they didn't live there until they got married, and then it was work towards building the career.
And so it's reversed.
Well, and the other thing is, my parents and grandparents certainly didn't have a HECS or help debt that was impinging them as well.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
You've actually just got a different set of variables.
And they're getting 6.6% or whatever the inflation is. Are they putting that on that?
That is one thing that I would say, and don't quote me on the dates, but well and truly before the end of the financial year, I think it might be in May or early June, the indexation on help/HECS debts go up. And if you make the repayment beforehand, you might miss out on a big jump. And it is linked to inflation. It's not.
So go into a bit more detail. So if you're a young person and you've got, what's an average HECS debt?
Say it's 50 grand.
50 grand. So you've got 50 grand owing. You can make a payment early?
Yeah, you can make a payment early. And let's say that you then don't get the increase. The increase only happens once a year. So it's not like a home loan that's sort of calculated daily and charged monthly.
Yeah.
Happens once a year. They add a big chunk on. So if you get in before they do that, it is calculated at the date.
Right.
So, the things that we'd also be like asking people to explore is, there is some opportunities to use those first home savers grant. There's superannuation options. There's a whole raft of things for people to explore to get into the property market. But to your point, Pete, it needs to be property that is going to go up from a capital point of view.
Yep.
Because compared to yesteryear, even those properties that might not go up in capital value, they're still costing people a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. We've had a few conversations about that too, in relation to the apartment market and how it hasn't performed for many years, but now they're not building them, so the supply's stopped. So whether or not we see that the capital value of those apartments starting to take off now will be something that is fascinating, because they're certainly selling faster, and they're certainly selling for a little bit more money than they used to be 12 months ago. So we're anticipating seeing that stuff really take.
And I think supply and demand, you're talking about the supply side. I also think the demand side is huge. If it's $1 million to buy in Blackburn,
at least,
you then need to find something else. There's not a lot of people that can buy their first property at $1 million.
Perfect. So, Matty, in short, we're looking at first sort of steps is reach out, find out information, set your goals, talk to each other, and then reach out to a firm like yourselves. Let you do the hard work, because you know the insides and outs that's going to suit them, and then take the next steps. And if that means that you're buying in an area that you don't want to live in, i.e. rent vesting, then so be it. But there's a million different options out there.
Yeah, just be prepared. I think what Pete said, be prepared for property to be a 10 to 20 year purchase.
Yep.
Don't do it lightly. Understand there's going to be peaks and troughs. We might reflect on this time as some really good buys, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I must admit, I'm looking at it now thinking, right, could go sideways for a bit. In other words, we might see not much growth for the next couple of years. And then, of course, in 5 years' time, is it going to be more expensive? Of course it is. Is it in 10? Definitely. So if you start looking 7 years plus, it's just a no-brainer. But getting in's the hard bit.
Yeah, and a really consistent thought that I think most people would hear when it comes to property is it's not trying to time the market, it's time in the market.
Yes.
Be there for as
long
long
as
as you
saying
can.
that one, an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's not, the growth isn't linear.
Yeah.
But it does happen.
Yeah.
Matt, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome, Matty. Good to see you, mate.
Cheers.